Hello, good morning, and welcome to Coffee, Buses and Politics.
Good morning.
Morning, Alex.
Good morning. How is everyone?
It's Happy Valentine's Day. I'm feeling in love with politics. Not really.
That is quite a bold statement for like 7:30 a.m.
No, we had such a lovely meeting of the county council this week. It was exceptional. It inspired me beyond all belief.
Inspired you to stay on for another term then.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
What happened at the county council?
So we're at budget setting time. And so as councillors, you expect that the budget meeting is going to be a long, drawn-out meeting, usually with the opposition proposing their own budget and have to debate it. And there's been times when the council has to come back for second day because they couldn't agree a budget. So we have a reserved date in the calendar. So it could have been another county council day today. In the end, what was it, about 6 hours long, Alex? 5-6 hours long, the meeting?
Yeah, around that.
And the Conservatives or the opposition didn't put forward their own budget. They just put forward a series of 11 amendments. No, more than 11 amendments, was it? 11 amendments. 11 amendments to try and spend the money in different places. Mainly Fenland and Sawtry were most of them. And their amendments added up to much more. So there's a pot of money available for potholes, and they were redistributing that to schemes in Fenland and Sawtry, such as I spoke against an amendment that wanted to build a £1.2 million speed camera in Wisbeach, which is a bit weird because speed cameras don't cost £1.2 million. Yeah, you can get a lot of speed cameras for £1.2 million, and none of it was very well thought out, and it was all very parochial, and it just went on for a long time. And it was just basically designed so they could having done no work on most of these schemes, they could put it in a budget meeting at the end of the county council basically, and then stick it in a leaflet saying we tried to do this and the opposition stopped us. Is the whole point of it, and so we'll see it all in leaflets. But it was pointless and didn't serve the people of Cambridgeshire at all, I don't think.
Yeah. So actually, your budget meeting was about the same length as one particular Huntingdon Town Council budget meeting.
Well, but we only put ours up by 4.99%, David.
Indeed, I actually think it was a really strange experience because obviously I've only been on the county council since 2021, and every year you kind of expect the kind of normal procedure of the opposition is putting forward an amendment saying, if we were in power, this is how we would have done the budget this year. And you have different choices. I mean, you can choose to go with this, same or similar council tax base increase in the budget, and but propose to perhaps prioritize some of the investments differently. So I think in some of the previous meetings, actually the opposition didn't propose, council tax freeze or anything like that, but said, we'll still increase council tax, but we will put more into highways or more into this other project as a whole budget proposal. However, what happened this time was really strange because the whole kind of speech of the leader of the opposition, Councillor Count, was this budget is so terrible, like it is outrageous. You're increasing council tax to 4.99%. A couple of councillors mentioned freezes in council tax, how we shouldn't increase. Okay, I totally respect that view. In that case, for sure, your response as a group should be, this is how we would do the budget, better than you with a 0% increase with a freeze. And therefore, this is what we would further cut from the budget, because obviously if you don't increase the council tax, you have to find some savings or efficiency somewhere else, because the money won't just magically appear. So it was really strange that instead of doing that, which could have been done, saying like, look, we'll do it better, we won't increase the tax or increase it less, and we will take this money from this budget or the other. It was a series of individual member amendments, and that's something that is, constitutionally you can do that. You can have a series, or you can have more than 11 individual member amendments. You can debate them separately like we have, instead of bundling them as well. So that's totally proper process to do. But it was really obvious, and that's something I mentioned in the speech as well, because one of the things that really upsets me often when hearing the arguments from the opposition saying, well, the administration is so Cambridge centric, they're only focusing on Cambridge, yet the series of 11 amendments obviously focused on their own divisions they hold, and probably wants to put in some literature ahead of the threats many of them have from reform this year, to say, look, we asked for, let's pick up one example, we asked for 1.2 million to be taken from the pothole budget to be allocated into road safety instead, to install cameras on Churchill Road in Wisbech, which I know is particularly bad situation there. I think something should be done from the safety perspective, but saying basically the county council refused to grant us 1.2 million to improve safety on this particular road in Wisbech. Please vote for us again, because we'll continue to fight for that thing. So as someone who worked in campaigns and organized campaigns, I totally get the political strategy behind it. The question is whether the public watching this will think, yeah, actually that was what's going on, or whether they'll think, well, the administration doesn't want to prioritize highways. It's kind of like if I was in opposition, and that's what I said in the debate, budget debate, if, let's say, Labour group was in opposition, or us in administration, now we're in opposition, and I said, instead of proposing working together on a budget amendment, I said, actually, I want 2.1 million for Newmarket Road, and I want another 1 million in Abbey to increase the LHI budget in my own division, because I think it's been ignored compared to other areas. You can already hear the argument of saying, like, why are you like just bidding for your own patch, and why are you being Cambridge centric, for example? Or, if Stephen said, I want 2 million for Little Paxton to do something on highways there, he would probably be accused of saying, why don't we actually work together to prioritize this budget on need and according to our policies, rather than him bidding for his own. And I think it's fine for councillors to stand up for, obviously, that's why we're there, to stand up for our own projects, but the budget is perhaps not the best place to do that.
No, and the thing is that most of those projects by themselves were relatively sensible and the sort of thing that we'd like to invest in. So, for example, the speed cameras in Wisbech, on a stretch of road where 2 people have died, I named them in the debate, over 15 years, is entirely sensible. If they come back to us with a reasonably costed plan with evidence of the speeding along that road and evidence of the people, injuries to people and those horrible fatalities, then that's the sort of thing I would I'd love to back and work with them to do. But to do it jump it in a budget without any costing, without any data or any information, and at one stage, so Steve Count, leader of the opposition, was arguing against this kind of basically scientific data-driven decision making. That's all you want to do, is scientific data-driven decision making. And these were a list of proposals which were just like, well, with no science, no data, and despite the fact lots of them were good ideas and you could have justified all of them, we couldn't justify any of them. And then bizarrely, the 10 of them were those kind of amendments, and then the last one was like, we realized we lost all these, but the last amendment was like, we want to give all the money to potholes again. And actually constraining highways and transport committee from spending money on other projects. Like potholes are important, but you don't want to say we can only spend this money on potholes when other things go wrong as well. So, for example, flood alleviation schemes are the sort of thing we'd like to spend money on, but they were trying to constrain us to only spend money on potholes, and the whole thing was just tedious and only really designed to be leaflet fodder for the upcoming elections.
What I found really fascinating on the potholes, because I do think, like, yes, we should put more money on potholes. Number one, the kind of like, I'm not sure who was the one mentioning it, but basically saying, like, I'm sure the Cambridge roads are fine, but that's why we prioritize our own areas. I actually think some of the Cambridge roads are worse than like some of the other towns that I often travel to. I think it depends how you see it, and that's exactly why we shouldn't judge it by perception. The perception of me driving into Cambridge and thinking like, oh my God, this is actually worse than like St. Ives or Huntingdon. It should be driven by the data, by like our intervention level standards, and by actually looking at what we should prioritize based on the different based on our policies, rather than like my perception as a driver driving around this county.
I think that's a really important point, actually, because you do get to see humans have got all of the usual cognitive biases that humans do. We're actually not that good at getting systematic data, and we have to do quite a lot of work to do that. And it can be really difficult when the roads are bad on your street for someone to say, actually, the roads are worse over there. And also you'll be looking at the roads you drive down, not the whole picture, and so on. So it is difficult. That said, there is a thing that there's also a need for things to improve everywhere. It's very difficult for people for people, say in Finland, to say to them, I'm afraid you've got to wait because the roads in Huntingdonshire are worse. And I do think there's got to be also a little bit more. I'm not sure what the word I'm looking for here is. Public buy-in, public understanding of how things like that are done.
Yeah, I think it's a very difficult thing, because like every time I go into Cambridge, I'm thinking it is worse. It is worse to what? To compare to the routes I'm driving in Huntingdon. There might be other roads in Huntingdon that are worse than the ones that I am driving, but I see it in the perspective of where I'm traveling. Again, when I went actually, like where did I go? Like in Coventry, and I drove to Coventry, and it was a terrible experience. I ended up on one of the country roads because I missed one of the turnings. And I thought, like, oh my God, this is like so much worse than in Cambridge. Like, I wonder, like, how the council is spending the highways budget here. So, like, obviously, there are good, better examples and worse examples, like across the UK. I got like an email from someone saying, like, well, the roads in another, neighboring county are much better. Well, it depends which one, and it depends how they're like managing their budget. But yeah, what was really interesting on this whole pothole thing, because basically what the amendment was saying is, okay, ring fencing. So there's this pothole funding in the CPCA budget grant allocation. So they're saying, like, from the 8.1 million that exists there, ring fence, so put 6.7 million only into potholes, because the kind of overall scheme that was agreed, including, with conservative members on highways and transport, said, okay, this will be like, yes, for pothole maintenance, but also for, like, cutting back vegetation, like, some footpaths work, like, some drainage issues and so on. What I find really fascinating is this focus, because the amendment says specifically, okay, ring fence this for potholes on carriageways, right? And I found it really fascinating in the whole debate around potholes as a thing. Never there was a mention of potholes on pavement, or the state of pavements, or the state of something that's not a road. Yeah, I'm sure they would have thought about that, but I think it's very interesting framing, and that's why I see it, unfortunately or not, from a political campaigning perspective. Because of course, you focus, if your key message is the war on motorists, obviously you're focusing purely on like carriageway potholes. If you had more of a message around, let's facilitate more active travel or people walking, you would probably say, as someone at least would be speaking about potholes on cycle lanes and potholes on pavements, and generally dangerous state of many pavements across the county, and how funding should be flexible to also have projects around that. So yeah, found it very fascinating, I think, from a narrative perspective as well.
I mean, and so pavements is one that's sort of close to my heart. Partly, I mean, the pavements in my ward are quite a lot of them in a really not very good condition, but there's actually also really quite complicated ownership structures, because you've got county, district, and places for people for owning different bits. So it's quite complicated to sort it all out. But also through I'm a trustee of Shop Mobility in Hunt Shop Mobility, which is hires out scooters in mobility scooters and other mobility equipment in Huntingdon. And the state of the paths is a real problem for a lot of our users, and people, more generally, people who use mobility scooters or wheelchairs, or just generally aren't as steady on their feet. That causes a lot of problem for people getting around. It doesn't have the I don't know, the whole war on motorists thing. I don't know. It's a little bit tedious, because the fact is we need improvements across lots of different modes of travel. So we need to improve the roads. We need to improve the pavements. We need to improve lots of stuff. There isn't funding to do all of it. So there are going to have to be some compromises. And that means that there is money that we could spend on roads that we'll spend on something else, and stuff that we could spend on something else that we'll spend on roads, because sometimes it will be the right thing to do. And I think that the sort of Yeah, I think the war on motorists is sort of line is not helpful. That said, I think there are some in the active travel community who sometimes don't necessarily help matters. A few. I mean, the thing is, for the most part, people are like, yeah, okay, there's decisions to be made. The other thing is, most people aren't just motorists. People walk places as well, and people cycle places. So I don't know. I find it a bit of yeah. I think we're in danger of agreeing with each other. So I'm going to shut up now.
Yeah, on the pavements issue. So one of the things I managed to do this year, last year, was that every county council division gets to make. Well, that's not quite true. In towns like Huntingdon and St Neots, every county council division gets to make a LHI bid. So there's 3 county council divisions in St Neots, and so we get to make 3 LHI bids, which is basically a bid for funding, partially funded by the town council or some other group, and mostly funded by the county council, and that's done competitively. And so local highways, most of those bids are normally about improving roads and road safety. But this year, highways also includes pavements, and so this year we managed to get, I think it was like 20 grand invested in adding extra drop curves and improving pavements in St Neots town centre, for the specific use of wheelchair users and other people with mobility issues. So Liz Owens and I went out and did a survey of the town centre, worked out where all the new drop curves should go, put a bid in, and we won it, which I think that's quite a big step forward, because that money has almost always been spent on roads before. And I think I've always thought that if you have a bump in your car or you damage your wheel, it's much less of a problem than somebody falling out of their wheelchair and injuring themselves. So very pleased for that to happen as well. So there are ways of doing that, but until we should have a chat, David, and chat with your county councillors. One of them's Tom, and see if we can do something in Huntingdon as well, because I think that would be a good thing to do.
Yeah, I mean it would. No, we'll have to chat offline. I mean, it's the situation up on the Oxmoor around Essex Road. A lot of it comes down to when the district council, so you've got the usual patchwork of ownership. When the district council sold off the housing, it complicated things in lots of ways. It's interesting. There's an LHI bid in at the moment from the town council for a SID, as I now know it's called, or an MVAS, but I prefer SID, on Sapley Road, for the top of Sapley Road, which sort of goes into my ward, for speed, because there's been a problem with speeding along there. And it's one where it's an intervention on the road, but it improves things for pedestrians.
I think the other thing that really frustrated me as a councillor on highways is, I think often the coordination of projects. And I think actually by keeping budgets a bit more flexible, obviously still for maintenance, but not saying this lot of money is only for potholes on the roads, on carriageways, and not anywhere else, is actually, I'll give you an example. I had one whole estate around 400 houses in Cambridge, and the roads were researched. So both the footpaths and the road on that estate were in very, very poor conditions, in the sense that petitions have been going on the county, that was before my time, saying please fix the road, please fix the pavements, and so on. So residents are really, really engaged. The efficient way to do there is to look, okay, there's a whole estate, both the road and footpaths are in terrible conditions. Let's do the project as a whole, right? And kind of saving money in the process. What happened is, I think in 2022, the road was resurfaced first. And then into a year and a bit later, the footpath was resurfaced second. And then obviously some people were pointing out rightly that actually the footpaths were worse than the roads. And then again, it depends on perception and so on. And then some parts of the footpath were left out because of the budget constraints. So you have to think like, well, if it was done the other way around, would we have had the footpath completely done and maybe missed some bits of the road? And if we didn't have it in 2 rounds, could the budgets have stretched to like the whole estate properly and not like miss out some bits? And I think that's the danger when you have those kind of like super ring fence, like, okay, this is only for this road and this is only for footpaths and so on, because it stops you to think holistically of like, okay, it really doesn't make sense. This whole area needs to be done. Let's find out, when in the process the money can be invested here and do it everything properly at once. And I think, I won't get into like contracts and subcontracts and so on, but that's like when you have like this kind of system where it's managed with various contractors, subcontractors, various teams that take care about particular bits. Often from a resident perspective, you look and what you see as a resident is, oh, okay, the county fixed the road first, the footpaths were actually worse, and then they wait another 2 years and they fix the footpaths, although they were like all reported and kind of like noted at the same time. So yeah, I think unless you're us in councils understanding kind of the different types of budgets and why those decisions are made, I think it's really frustrating from a resident perspective.
Yeah. Anyway, should we get on to the show?
Well, this was the show as the full county council meeting.
Yeah. No, I'm joking. We had just before you came in, Steve and I were talking about what we were going to cover. So, 3 other big pieces of news in Cambridgeshire politics this week. I think the first one is last Friday, not long after we finished broadcasting, two announcements from the Mayor of Cambridge and Peterborough, Dr. Nik Johnson. First one is that he signed off on bus franchising, and the second one is that he's not going to seek re-election.
Yeah, I saw the newspaper. I think that was a surprise to most people. I said it last night at a parish council meeting, and one of my council colleagues in district council said, "Oh, I wasn't surprised," but I think it was a surprise for most of us. I know there'd been rumours around, because maybe it wasn't a surprise for inside the Labour Party, but I think it was for you at least, David. And I know that people had raised rumours that Nik hadn't been mentioned in a speech by a top-ranking Labour politician who talked about, it might have been Angela Rayner, but talking about all the mayors, and he hadn't been mentioned, and then noticed that he hadn't announced he was standing. And so when the newspaper article came out saying he wasn't standing, I sent him a text message and he phoned me straight away. And sad news, because I think, his time as mayor hasn't been completely successful, isn't it? And he's faced lots of challenges, both personal and political. But actually, he's leaving the combined authority in a much, much, much better state than he found it. Partly helped out by the other political swings that have happened across the county. But I think it's sad news. It's sad news, and it's quite bad news for Labour as well, because he's a well-known figure, and to have to. We don't know who the Labour candidate's going to be yet. We only know 2 candidates, don't we, so far? Who is Paul Bristow for Conservatives and Laura Dupre for the Lib Dems. And so we're into February.
I thought the Reform candidate had been announced. Am I wrong on that?
No. And the person we thought was going to be the Reform candidate is apparently not going to be the Reform candidate. So I think Reform have had lots of changes. I talked to Guy Lackland at County Council, who was the Reform parliamentary candidate who stood against me, who I disagree with on many, many, many things, but he's also quite a nice chap to talk to, and quite friendly with Guy. And he had been trying to get people to run for Reform across the whole county. And I asked him how the campaign was going on Tuesday, and he told me that he'd been expelled from Reform and he wouldn't be standing. So there's been lots of changes. It's just it's always quite chaotic, isn't it? They always have people being, I think before the general election, Guy was announced as their candidate, then deselected, they put somebody else in, and then reselected, and they put him back again. And so it always seems quite a chaotic and immature political party. It doesn't have the structures of some other political parties, I don't think, or the constitutions.
Well, it does take time until you manage to have like a proper selection process. I think it'll be interesting, because I know I have read various news around the different potential candidates for Reform, including like one of the a local businessman, like obviously like there were like a few other like activists, quite high profile activists online who might have considered. But then again, you could also have like one of the other bigger names in Reform, because at the end of the day, for like mayoral combined authority, like anyone who lives or works in the whole combined authority area could stand. So there are like people who might have businesses in the area, who might not necessarily live in the area, who might consider standing, for example. So it would be actually really interesting to see like what the final announcement. Yeah, there are like various rumors at the moment, and also like about the Green candidate. Like, you know, I read like mixed messages as well, like just some commentary online saying like, okay, the Greens decide they will stand in any election regardless, but also reading some comments about whether they will stand depending on, you know, who the other candidates are, or whether they will stand depending on whether they think they could keep their deposit, because the deposit for the obviously combined the mayoral election is very high compared to like a local council one. So that's, yeah, again, like considerations for their party. So it will be interesting to see whether the Greens actually stand or not, or prefer to perhaps focus their resources and efforts on their county seats targets, which are like, you know, at least a couple of them, if not three, very likely to be won, instead of, you know, fighting a combined authority mayor election with a very high deposit.
Very, very high deposit. Lots of people have asked me if I'm going to stand after my incredibly successful parliamentary campaign, and like independents couldn't afford without some sort of proper financial backing. No independent.
How much is the deposit for mayor?
I don't know.
I think I think it's 5,000, depending on the. Yeah, I heard it's at least 5,000.
But it's not. It's that, as in most of these things, the deposit is irrelevant. It's the printing cost, isn't it, to try and get to 600? No, probably nearly 1 million people in across the. Well, it's not 1 million voters, but you know, you're gonna have to press 600,000 leaflets. It's about the same size as what is it? There's 10 MPs on the patch, something like that. So it's about 10 times the size of a parliamentary campaign, of which, you know, I spent 10 grand. So you're looking at order 100 grand just to get a couple of leaflets out, probably.
Yeah,
and having to have people to deliver those as well. And I don't have the scale. I mean, it's not feasible to do for somebody like me. Not feasible for the Greens, perhaps, as well. You know, and I think that's part of their strategy, isn't it? Is they try to focus in areas they think they could win. And I think it's if they don't stand, that's a sensible decision. I do think Labour are too slow in selecting candidates, though, Alex. I mean, if we look back at the general election, you took a long time. We knew you were up for it. You were never quite sure you were going to get selected, but it took a long time to get you selected. And if you'd started campaigning earlier, you know, if you could start campaigning earlier, you might have got those extra votes, and you might be an MP now. It might just been David talking this morning. Might have to drag Martin out of bed from wherever he is.
I mean, we've also being slightly careful with what I say, there is a frustration that Nik hadn't been confirmed as the candidate, and if there was going to be some shenanigans, I don't know what discussions were going on, who, you know, if this had been planned for a while or what. I genuinely have no idea. But to end up where we are, where, to be honest, it isn't that long until the election, is just making it harder for us.
Yeah.
It's not great. And it's not like the election was unanticipated. We knew when the date was going to be. We knew when it was, when the election would be, and that is just really quite frustrating.
I mean, I think we also have to I think there's something I was thinking about, whether Nik knew at least within his mind beforehand or not, because often, especially with more personal reasons and health reasons, you actually don't really know, or you think you could do it, but then when it gets very close and it's that moment that I actually have to decide now, you think actually I don't have the energy in me, and I don't feel healthy enough, or I don't feel that I can take on another election campaign. It is difficult, because I think for lots of people, they decide at least in the summer. So for example, when I thought should I restand for county or not, it was a post general election summer decision, and I thought about the arguments for and against, standing or restanding, but it was okay, I have to decide in the summer, because if I decide, I have to start working on setting up the campaign, being actually ready for the short campaign from the autumn, really. And especially in such a big election like the combined authority, you kind of, I think have to start campaigning in the autumn and not 6 weeks before the election. But I also understand how some people, perhaps depending on your own individual circumstances, it might get much closer, and I can actually think, I can't do this anymore, I can't go through another election, and that's fair enough and fine to say I'm standing down, and I think I respect that.
That's fine, and I understand that. It's just I don't understand why we hadn't. And if Nik came to his decision, and on a personal level, I wish him the best, and is a friend. We should, but like Labour as an institution should have already chosen its candidate. When we hadn't started a process, Nik wasn't the candidate. It's a bit hard to understand why, so close into the thing, we didn't have a candidate.
Because I think everyone assumed. I think everyone I spoke to assumed Nik would restand, which I was hoping he would as well. But then I totally understand why he doesn't.
Yeah,
I do think this opens up questions around I guess, how many people can make it through a second term. I was actually discussing this with some of my friends in other areas who are councillors in London boroughs, for example, or other areas. Who are after one term, they said that's enough for me, I'm not doing it anymore. And it's actually a very interesting this sort of similarities of not only health reasons but just this question can I do another 4 years of putting up with often I would say divisive, toxic and so on discussions and debates or not. And that's interesting in terms of who can stay and what what kind of types of I guess demographics or backgrounds and experiences stay on for a second term as opposed to the one term politicians, and especially the council level. It's very interesting to look at.
So somebody sent me a clip of the county council on YouTube at Old Church Hall, not the previous county council but the one before that. And Sebastian was chair, and I watched it because I love watching Sebastian chairing, and just seeing how much it had changed, actually, how much the culture changed, because it was very different at Old Church Hall, which neither you and I experienced. But looking around the faces in that council, I recognise almost no one. Now, part of that's down to the fact there was a huge swing and when we got in, lots of existing county councillors, especially from the Conservative side, lost their seats. But I also think, like you say, the attrition is enormous. You know? And I'm having that discussion with myself constantly about restanding for county and whether I want to do it, because I don't take much joy from it anymore. All day meetings like the one on Tuesday where nothing happens, and there are rare moments of pleasure and influence, but also this county council is going to be a county council which is going to have a shortened term, almost certainly, and mostly it's going to be shutting down the authority and before we move on to something new. And it doesn't really seem like a very inspiring place to be. And I just think that I was out last night, I was out the night before, and for me, having a night at home with my wife and my family in the evening is an unusual thing, and it's not really worth it quite often, So I don't know if I'm going to stand or not either. And I can completely understand where Nik's coming from, especially considering his very significant health issues that he's had as well. And I think he's been, he was elected at a difficult time when the combined authority was in an awful state, and he's turned around lots of that, and he's got bus franchises in. He's certainly made some mistakes, but then we all have, haven't we, in our political and personal careers? And so I'm really sad that he's leaving. And I think he's been good for great for the combined authority. I really do. I think whoever comes next has a much better combined authority to lead, and let's hope that they don't just throw it away and we don't have more political shenanigans. What we need is another Andy Street, not Paul Bristow, probably. We'll see what Paul does. Give him a chance.
Well, I'll also
get selected.
Yeah, that's. I also think it depends as well, in terms of what. If you feel like your aims have been accomplished as well, and I actually respect people who are standing down. If it's well, I run on a platform of, let's say, getting bus franchising across the line, and I actually achieved that, and I feel that's the right moment for me to step down. Obviously, there are other personal and health reasons as well, but I think often they're also. On the one hand, you have people who only stay for one term and can't stay for another, even if they will be good for another term. But then you also have in politics people who stay on forever, for 50, 60 years, just for the sake of staying, and often not doing too much work. And I think there's a decision to be respected in the sense of okay, if I can't put my full attention and capacity into this role, to the extent you can, having a job alongside it because the allowance is not full time and so on and so forth. But if you feel that you can't actually dedicate the energy to this job, I think it's very respectable to say, actually, I got what I promised to do. I got franchising over the line. Now it's time for someone else to continue that work. And I think some politicians won't do that, for the sake of staying, for another term and staying in power. And I think there are different reasons why people are in politics, and there's also the danger of having someone saying, okay, like 20 years later I'm still here, but I don't have that drive anymore, I don't have that kind of like, you know, aims anymore I had at the beginning, and it kind of like all becomes very complacent at some point.
Yeah.
Alex, we've got a question in. You could probably answer this one, can't you? Because it's a bit complicated. It's different than the general election. Who gets to vote in the mayoral election?
Definitely, and I will share a tool as well, just in the comments, which is like a very good tool. It's called canivote.org.uk, which I actually put on my leaflet so people can check, and you can put the I put it in the comments now, like you can put the country and see who can vote where. But in short, British, Irish, and Commonwealth citizens, qualifying Commonwealth citizens, it means you have a permission to stay in the UK, or you don't need such permission, can vote in all elections in the UK. That includes general elections. Someone like, say from India who's lawfully here could have voted in the general election in Huntingdon, let's say. In addition, because it's a local level election, some EU citizens, not all, can vote. So if you arrived before Brexit was implemented, so in 2021, you retain your voting rights, because when we used to be in the EU, obviously British people in Spain could vote in Spain and in the local elections, and Spanish people here could vote in local elections here. However, if you arrived after the Brexit implementation day, you can only continue voting if your country has a bilateral voting rights agreement with the UK. So I think there are 5 at the moment. Do check on the website: Spain, Portugal, Luxembourg, Poland. So yeah, let's say you're from Poland, there's a bilateral deal. So even if you arrived like, you know, a month ago and you're lawfully resident here, doesn't matter how long you have been. You know, if you're British in Poland, you can vote in their local elections. If you're Polish here, you can vote in local elections. However, if you're from Romania and arrived a month ago and you live next to said Polish person, you can't vote if you arrived at the same time as them, but you can vote if you arrived before 2021. So this is why a tool has been created, canivote.org.uk, where you can put your country and actually see the up-to-date information, because by the time someone might listen to this video in 3 months' time, another country could have a bilateral voting rights agreement, but the website will be updated, but our video wouldn't. So yes, it is all very fun. Obviously, if you're in Scotland and Wales, different rules apply, because there everyone can vote in their local and devolved elections, regardless of nationality, if they have lawful status or refugee status. So yes, don't take what I said if you live in Scotland or Wales, but for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, basically Commonwealth, British, Irish, and some EU, check the country on the tool that I posted.
So I didn't understand any of that. So thank you. Well, I understood after you explained it, but I hadn't understood that before. So thank you very much. That seems like a really useful tool, and it seems
that's why you have the tool.
Because it seems unnecessarily complicated, doesn't it? As well, my personal view is, if you pay council tax in this country, yeah, you should have a right in saying how that's been allocated, isn't it?
Oh, so sorry.
So you answered Max's original question.
Eligibility. Yeah, so it's anywhere in Cambridgeshire and so obviously the whole Peterborough Unitary Authority, and in the whole Cambridgeshire County Council boundaries. What do you think is the best way to check? I think because obviously we have Cambridgeshire Insight, where you can check in which electoral division you're in, and there are like a few things.
So if you pay your council tax, to Peterborough City Council, Huntingdonshire District Council, Fenland District Council, East Cambs District Council, or Cambridge City Council, then you live in the region. So, or if you pay your council tax to Cambridgeshire County Council, although people in Peterborough don't do that. So it's Cambridgeshire County Council plus Peterborough is the real answer. So if you live in any of those places, then you should be able to. And there are various tools where you can just put in your postcode and see who your local councillor is. So yeah. And of course, you should get a voting slip through as well before the election. So that's another indication.
Yeah, if you Google register to vote, you'll get a thing on the Gov.uk website, and if you click on Start Now, and go through, it'll and you put in your date of birth and whatever, and then it will. I'm just doing it now. It will tell you basically where you vote. So yeah. So should we go talking also about the combined authority? We've also got bus franchising has been signed off.
Yeah, which is, I mean, that was basically, did Nick announce his departure the day after that was signed off, wasn't it? I think. I mean,
same day.
Same day. So that's obviously part of his motivation, wasn't it? That's his big. That was his big thing that he wants to do. I think before he was elected, it's one of the things the platforms he stood on, and he managed to get it done as well. And I think it's it's not been an easy path, has it? But and it has been criticised for doing it quite late in his term, and handing on bus franchising to whoever comes next. I saw Paul Bristow. You challenged Paul Bristow, didn't you, on Facebook last night? Was it yesterday? What was that? How did that conversation go? You trying to get Paul Bristow to comment on bus franchising and had to go through about 5 messages when he was avoiding the question. I thought, but so in the end, what did he say?
So I don't want to be sort of. I am going to criticize Paul because I think what he's come out with is not massively impressive. Actually I'll find the specific thing. So bus franchising, buses are important, but they're also a big part of what the combined authority can do and what the combined authority has been doing. I think it's reasonable that to think he would have a position on that. So he posted on the Huntingdon Facebook group saying he'd been in the Market Inn, asking what's his favourite pub. What's our favourite pub in Huntingdon?
Just to say, like a bit of not to criticize anyone, because it's not only the Conservative candidate. Lots of people from different parties. I love how everyone is doing what's your favorite cafe? What's your favorite pub? I use that in the general election, I think, but I actually see how more and more people from different parties, because it does get engagement, and that's why it's here I am in a cafe, what's your favorite cafe, or where's the best bacon sandwich in the constituency? Yeah. I know Ben had cakes of the campaign, which I thought was great, during the Huntingdon parliamentary campaign. I asked about people about cafes and stuff. So it's good to see more candidates, and it's not only Paul, there are others as well doing the same kind of thing. So it's just a lighter comment before David comes on his actual policy criticism. But I actually do enjoy seeing some of the boss.
Bit of fun. I think it's a bit thin, but it gets it humanizes you and whatever, and hopefully it means people can have a discussion. I just put a short content. Can I ask if you support bus franchising? And Paul's response was, I've been in meetings today discussing the mayor's plan to see how it will work. So I pushed back and said, do you support bus franchising, basically? And he came back, and the comment was, the mayor, amongst other things, the mayor's tied the hands of any future mayor on the concept of bus franchising, and I commit to make it work. Whether this is exactly what the mayor has proposed requires detail and thought, as I'm sure you can appreciate. That's what the meeting yesterday was about. But to be clear, I shall improve and enhance bus services across the county, and I will not seek to overturn the concept of bus franchising. He hasn't actually said whether he thinks bus franchising is a good idea, but I think pretty clearly there he said he is not going to overturn bus franchising, and he commits to make it work. So I think that's good.
I think that's definitely positive. I mean, I also understand because unless you're super ideologically opposed to this concept, it will be a nightmare to actually reverse the process. So I think from a practical perspective, it's okay, this decision has happened. It was a majority in the consultation, we actually want to make it work rather than trying to reverse something that's already been through all the stages. And actually it's supported by a large majority of people. So I think, both practically and politically at this stage is not a good idea unless you're very, personally against the concept. So I think the right thing to say.
The issue I have is that I think that's something that is quite important, but I don't think he said anything. Correct me if I'm wrong, and if Paul, anyone from his campaign, if I get it wrong, do say and I'll correct it. but I don't think he said anything really about bus franchising, what he's going to do and so on. But he's put a thing up on his Facebook. Clear rules. So leave politics to the mayor. My plan. Clear rules are needed for the combined authority. If I become mayor, there will be no 4-day week, no staff working almost entirely at home, no EDI officers, no pronouns in email signatures, no campaign-based months, weeks, or days. Instead, I'll ensure that CPCA values excellence and public service, recruits entirely on merit, respects people with different views, keep politics out of the workplace. And I think that is the worst kind of populist twaddle. So so you've got the thing. Labour Cambridge spends taxpayers' money on veganuary and other campaigns. Now, as people may know, I happen to be a vegan. The part of that is the environmental thing. Eating meat is more sort of uses more environmental resources than not. Fine. Campaign-based months, weeks, or days. Does that mean we're not going to do anything about, say, violence against women and girls? Does that mean, for instance, that we're not going to be doing things for the Royal British Legion and so on?
He already responded to me on this. I asked him because this is a recycled to make the environment, a recycled post from like a few weeks ago when he made the same pledges. And I did ask Paul whether this would mean like not doing like Armed Forces Day or White Ribbon campaign, and he responded to me saying, and I think I quote, proper civic events are obviously fine, and but then I asked him a follow-up saying, okay, so with campaign days, how do you define the campaign? So because White Ribbon Day, for example, or Mental Health Day is a campaign. So that's why I think it gets really populist and dangerous, because who is to decide which campaign? So let's say you take all out the civic events, Armed Forces Day is fine, like all the the veteran celebrations, all fine, like all the civic stuff. Campaigns, okay, who is to decide that this one campaign is fine and that one is not, like unless you are involving yourself in an operational level of the authority you're managing or the council or whatever that you shouldn't really be involved in. It's really not my job as a councillor and I really like to be like, okay, we shouldn't like put a post on social media about this awareness day on X or Y. Like it's not I don't understand like why we should get involved in that.
It's also not a huge cost thing though either, is it? Because I was chair of county council for nearly 2 years, and in that time I must have raised about 50 flags. Like it was part of my usually once every other week I'd have to dash up to Alconbury World in my suit, and raise a flag, meet with some people who were supporting that campaign, and then I'd put some photos on social media. And it would go on with it. And actually, the cost of the county council was my time, which I'm not paid for, basically. So I was running up and down to Alconbury World, and the cost of buying the flag. Social media doesn't cost anything, and so maybe an officer's time in writing a social media post. But it's not like they've got teams of people working on veganuary and things, is it? It isn't.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. But it's this thing about keeping politics. So what this comes down to is, it's not no campaign days, it's no campaign days I don't approve of.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was trying to get, is like who decides, and if it's you, how why your personal views. So for example, let's take this like veganuary issue, because it's been like repeated and repeated like forever, like, and it's Cambridge City Council, there's no a combined authority thing, there's no like such thing happening. But anyway, it's like a Cambridge City Council, like for the reasons like David mentioned, it's like an awareness thing, some social media activity. I think some of their events like have vegan food, or like there was a motion from the Greens to council which was approved in the past. Anyway, it doesn't matter. As someone who's not vegan, not vegetarian, and at events I do go for the meat options. I don't care if I'm at an event and it's only vegan food. Like I'm not going to like a council event to like just eat my whole like day's worth of like calories. I'm going there to like network, to like listen to presentation. I can eat like a vegan cake or snack. Yeah, it doesn't bother me. Like I don't understand why people are so upset about this, and it's not that I don't feel like it's pushing a certain lifestyle or whatever onto me. I will still like go and make my own choices at home, right? Like I don't feel like it's pressuring me. It's like it's raising awareness. I understand. I'm a bit more educated about the impact of this. Like it's not like stopping me or limiting my individual freedom in that sense. So I don't understand why it's so politicize this issue. I think people should be informed, should be aware, and perhaps some people make different choices if they're informed about this, and some will not. But yeah, it's about awareness, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, but it's also the things like keep politics out of the workplace. I really object to this, and I've also, it's one of the things that now he may mean keep partisanship, and and this is this may be me being the pedant that I am, but it's like I've even heard people say like, oh, our town council or our parish council is non-political, when what they may mean is it's not partisan. The thing is, if you're saying, oh, we're not going to do pronouns on email signatures, we're not going to do EDI and so on, that is putting politics in the workplace. If you're coming out and saying, this is how things are going to be done, that is by definition a political decision. And it's this, this sort of slightly nihilistic view that, that, oh, anything that's going on we don't like, oh, that's because it's politics. It ends up just giving politics a bad name. Sorry, you can probably tell that it's really quite annoyed me what that sort of pledge document thing that went up on Facebook, because it's like, you've got the 4-day week thing in South Cambs. Now you can, I think it should be possible to discuss that, does it actually work? Does it improve things for the council? And you could work out, does it make things more productive? Sorry?
Isn't that for like planning services? Because they're saying like it's City and South Cambs, I think, because they have shared planning service. Because Cambridge City doesn't have it in other departments, I don't think so. I think it's planning, which is shared service.
But the thing is, I don't think anybody's proposed it for the combined authority.
No.
So it's a bit like saying that voting for Paul Bristow will prevent dragon attacks in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. It wasn't going to happen anyway, and it just feels a bit culture war-y. And it's like you have to sort of poke to find out what somebody thinks about actually quite an important area which the combined authority is directly responsible for, but can't get talking about something which is important but not a core function of the role is a bit of a battle. And I mean, and the thing is, okay, I'm having a go at Paul here, and if Paul wants to come on and it would be great to have him on, and I promise to be nice, but this is, and I'm not saying that you won't have Labour people doing the other version, or talking about things that actually they have no control over at all. But it's pretty frustrating.
No, it is, because like those issues as well, like they're like operational issues. So like at the end of the day, whether regardless of my personal views on like 4-day week or whether it's more productive or not, what I feel personally, right? Like it's like an organization decision to go for a trial. They're going to like analyze the results, whatever. Like I have my personal views, like I have quite strong views on this issue, but it's not my job, like as like if I was standing for mayor, to like comment on like the merits of a trial, not in a council like under the combined authority. I can look at okay, is it happening? The combined authority is being proposed, like no, then like South Cambs doing their trial and like choosing to continue or not is not really my business or my priority or my main role to be involved in. So it's clearly being done from a campaign perspective. It's not like, oh, I care so much about this issue. Like it's like, oh, I have to wrap up everything in this culture war argument to like attract a certain like segment of swing voters, which I appreciate from a campaign perspective, but at the same time it's really unhelpful, because like it's kind of like local, people standing for like, I don't know, town council or like district council or county council speaking about stopping the boats and immigration and border security. It's like, yeah, you can, we all have our views, but as a council you can like legislate zero like on that. It's still like parliament doing that stuff. You can have your personal view, but like you going on an immigration platform, like in the local election, like might win you votes this time, but then when people will see that you don't stop any immigration in your local ward because you don't have those powers, then it might not work next time doing the same kind of platform. So yeah, I mean, each has in my view like the right to, like, do their campaign however they want. But it's really frustrating on the EDI aspect, because I actually looked into this. Let's look into, because there's no EDI stuff. So first of all, there are public sector duties under the Equalities Act 2010. So you need to have some sort of capacity in your organization to be able to fulfill your public sector duties. But let's look how many, because I think maybe people think there's like hundreds of staff doing this role. So first of all, like, equality and diversity should be part of everyone's role. So even if it's not EDI in your job, or like, you're not paid to do EDI, if I'm like someone working in the library service, I have to have an awareness and understanding of those, of the Equalities Act and of those issues, and making sure like I am working and, contributing to a welcoming space for people, right? Even if I'm not paid to do EDI. But let's look at who is actually paid to do, EDI policy advice. So in the county, let's speak about the county council. In the county council, there's like 2 members of staff, right? So there's like a business partner and an advisor, and there's one time like a support officer, or one part-time member of staff. So we're speaking about like 2.5 or something like this members of staff, right? That are specifically like doing this in an organization that like covers like, the Cambridgeshire County Council with like thousands of employees. So actually it would be interesting to see how it compares to like companies or like private businesses as well. But I actually thought there's not, it's not many staff roles. I mean, if you were to say no more of those staff roles, you couldn't probably even do like 3 LHI projects with the saving you're making, and then you're like at risk of not being able to fulfill your Equality Act duties as well. So
sorry. Just on that, the other thing is, one of the things that comes up, under, we should be taking EDI seriously. It's something I'm in favor of, but the one of the things that comes under EDI is disability.
Yeah.
And so this is to take the library example. No EDI stuff means you're not giving, say, consideration to how neurodiverse people might use the library, or how people with reduced mobility might physically get around the library. It's that sort of thing where sorry, I've got annoyed about this now. But it's the thing is, Paul has got a line there, which actually, he could come out and say, okay, on bus franchising, he could say, I like bus franchising, I don't like bus franchising, whichever it happens to be. But the situation we're in is bus franchising is happening. I'm not going to try to undo it, and I'm going to try to make it work. Now you can sort of agree or disagree with the philosophical bit, but then say, okay, this is what I'm going to do in policy terms, and you can maybe have a bit of a discussion about, okay, what do you think bus franchising should look like? How are you going to make it work? That sort of thing. Okay, maybe realistically, you're never going to have an election campaign on that basis.
No, it's too detailed. What you have to say is end the war on motorists and end the war on the wokeness and end the war on motorists, and that is how I actually get frustrated how simplified, because like a lot of those issues are complex, and actually when you chat to people like one-to-one, people are actually interested, like many people are interested in the details of those issues, or like even from potholes, which potholes are reported and why, like which ones are prioritized, like what franchising actually means, like can it be reversed, like, and so on, things like that. But yeah, obviously, like the kind of elections are simplified, the slogan level. I just want to say something else on EDI, on Equalities Act, because if you're saying, okay, like no more, does it say no more EDI stuff, or like no more further investment in EDI stuff? Because if you're saying like you don't have anyone, right? Let's say the Equalities Act 2010. So there's different regulations attached to like an act of parliament, right? So like there's like this gender pay gap information regulations for public sector bodies, which since 2017, they require actually public, private and voluntary sector organizations that have more than 250 employees, which includes the county council, to report every year their gender pay gap. So that is like in law, right? Like whether you agree or not to the law, then like, lobby your MP, like if you're in Peterborough, Andrew Pakes or whatever, like to change that if you want. I'm not sure where he lives at the moment, but like, let's say he lives near Peterborough. But I am just curious, like how it will work in practice, because you have like, this is just a small an example. Like there are other duties, like if you don't have those staff with this knowledge and like legal knowledge as well, like how on earth are you able to like actually fulfill them? And if you think you shouldn't fulfill those things because you disagree with them from an ideological point of view, it wouldn't work because you have to change legislation through Parliament.
Yeah.
So
what it specifically says is no EDI officers.
yeah, so like for example, in the council, in the county council, we do have an EDI advisor, precisely like on those issues. So that's like technically an EDI officer. There's like, yeah, as I said, like 2.5 members of staff full-time equivalent in the county council.
Are there actually any people doing that role as their whole role at the county, at the combined authority?
No idea, but I can find out. I know in the county council there's like, 2
2.5.
full-time posts and half,
Yeah.
and a part-time post. And it's across the council as well. That's why it's a lot of organizations have the EDI advisors who basically have the the legal knowledge of like the different duties the council has and advise different obviously departments and projects and so on. Yeah, I mean even our council papers that councillors comment on have like does this impact on different areas of equalities and so on, like equalities impact assessment and so on, like this kind of, sometimes other officers might do this paperwork, but you have an advisor to be able to say that everything's in order and done legally. So yeah, that's why I'm really curious, like, okay, like if you're saying like no more, like who on earth will do those things that you actually have to comply with? So I think Paul to that will say, yeah, it's fine, like we obviously will, fulfill the obligations under the law, but then what else is on top of that? So then you're going back to what David was mentioning at the beginning of basically what we mean by that is we don't like veganuary, or we don't like, I don't know, LGBT plus flag raising at the county council or whatever it might be. That's what it comes down to. Because I think everyone who thinks about this pragmatically will accept, yes, we need the staff to deal with those obligations under the Equalities Act, but we don't want the promotion of certain events we disagree with personally.
Yeah, and that it's like that. Okay, you could make an argument for marking or not marking veganuary. You could make that argument, and I think there is a thing. You have a week for everything. There's national this week. Okay, you can have the argument anyway.
But also on that motion, just to say one other thing, like, 'cause it really annoys me, this subject. Like on that motion, like I understand there was like a motion to the city council. Like I think it initially like Green councillors and then like Labour voted for the motion as well, for like having vegan food at council run events, or like anyway, like it's changed since the policy, but like it was a few years ago, something around those lines. Yeah, basically people like elected the councillors like in Cambridge to like debate those things, and obviously like anyone can put a motion on any topic, and it's something they decided like as a council. I actually like got a few emails at the time when this was happening in Cambridge saying, would you put this motion to county council? And I said, that's not one for me personally, but maybe others would. And I think like each councillor like has the right to bring those kind of things, and if a majority actually votes to go with it, then that's kind of like the local level democracy, I guess. Yeah, it's just like interesting from like a democratic perspective, because I remember being specifically asked, would you propose similar? That's like that's not a topic that I would necessarily like take forward, but it doesn't mean that others wouldn't. And then like you have to listen to the arguments like for and against. I remember doing like a motion, I think a while ago, on like encouraging the council run in funded events, doing focusing more on like local, buying from local suppliers and like local shops and products and so on. So yeah, I don't know what do you think about, Stephen, about that, but
I must admit, since your motion, the quality of soft drinks at county council. One of the things is that as a council, you very, especially with the veganuary and kind of catering stuff, you experience so little of it. Everything's we're always getting like made up lunches and drinks and stuff. Like, a full day county council meeting, you don't even get water, do you? No, I don't think there's any water.
No, you buy your own coffee.
You buy your own water, so you don't get coffee and tea, and you certainly don't get lunch. And so the only time I've ever really experienced the council's hospitality is during citizenship ceremonies, and that's because they're legally obliged to provide some sort of refreshments to new citizens. And so we have quite nice kind of funky local soft drinks, which are quite nice. But other than that, there are no free lunches, literally, as a councillor, because I don't think I've had very many sandwiches on behalf of Cambridgeshire County Council in 4 years, and so like none of it really matters, does it? It's just really, really small stuff. The EDI stuff matters greatly. That really does. That's really important. And my feeling is that the result of all this is you're going to disenfranchise your employees. And any local authority is only, councillors are important, but actually the officers are more important because they're doing the work every day. Huntingdonshire District Council has lost lots of great officers, I think, to the Combined Authority, because the Combined Authority is also based in Huntingdon and also, pays more money. And as you can see from the way things are going, is going to have many more powers in the future. And so those kind of people, lots of those kind of people who come from, decent-minded people or people with disabilities or people, EDI, people who are involved in EDI, I think, are going to get disenfranchised from it. And it's going to be more and more difficult to hire people, I think, And I work for a big engine supplier now, or manufacturer, and they, they're a big American agricultural and building company, and they go out of their way to be, EDI friendly. And I don't understand it. It's just the way the world's going, and it's just, it's a stupid campaigning point that's only going to hurt them and hurt people. And I think it's silly.
And it's also it is the way the world's going. Well, I'm glad it's the way the world's going. There is some amount of people being silly about things and being performed, whatever. But fundamentally, this is about making it so that we treat people fairly. Now that should be reason enough to do it. It's also good business sense, because it means you can draw from the widest pool of potential staff. But trans people will want to know that they will go to work somewhere where they're not going to be getting snide comments, and they will get support. Similarly for LGBT people, or women want to know that it's not it's not going to be a sexist environment, that there's good, anyway, you get it. And it feels like a retrograde suggestion, it does feel like, we're saying this so that we can not be like those awful woke people. And that just feels a bit cheap.
Yeah, it's really simplifying. It's like, I'm just looking at the wonderful poster from HQ. The council spends taxpayer money on veganuary and other campaigns. Okay, Fenland Council also spends money on campaigns they celebrate there, and rightfully so. East Cambs also got campaigns and flag ceremonies and so on. Every single council define campaigns. It's basically saying council spends taxpayer money on something I happen to disagree with quite strongly, and other campaigns to make you even more worried about the amount of taxpayer money that's being spent on things you disagree with. So it's okay, yeah, it's fine. It's fine. I'm just very intrigued by. I love analyzing campaign materials. So yeah, I'm going to save this one for Opposition Watch.
Should we talk briefly, because it's time is marching on? There's the letter that came around from Jim McMahon, who is the Minister of State for Local Government and English Devolution, that went round to the leaders of the Peterborough City Council, Cambridgeshire County Council, and the district councils in Cambridgeshire. Slightly a huge, I was going to say a huge wordy letter came from Capri. That's a bit harsh. But they've asked for an interim plan to be submitted on or before the 21st of March 2025, and full proposals by 28th of November 2025, which seems the deadline of 21st of March for interim proposals seems very, very quick.
Yeah, it does. So I spent part of the lunchtime at County Council, at which I bought my own sandwiches, actually from home. I didn't go to the shop to buy them. I bought my home sandwiches.
What was it vegan or not?
It was cheese. I don't even really like cheese, but whatever.
Okay, it's not acceptable.
I'm also clearly not a vegan. And I spent that time talking to some, senior county councillors, about the way they thought it was going, and I don't think there was any consensus at all, was there? And I think for me, it feels like it's going to be difficult to come to any agreement in that time, other than the very easy, simplistic solutions, which you'll probably see, Cambridge City Council and South Cambs go together, and all the others in a bun fight. I can only imagine that's going to be probably that's the most obvious solution, but not necessarily a great one for people in the south of Huntingdonshire, or the whole of Huntingdonshire perhaps. So it's really difficult. Nobody had a good, and everybody was kind of fighting for their own areas, and East Cambs people are arguing that East Cambs is a special exception and should be part, because everybody in East Cambs looks to Cambridge. Well, most people in St Neots and St Ives, especially St Ives, also look to Cambridge as well. So we're no different than East Cambs. Might not be true in Yaxley, which probably looks to Peterborough and Sawtry and those kind of places, but there are no easy solutions. And if we're not allowed to cut, the feeling is that we probably won't be allowed to change existing boundaries. It's going to be an amalgamation of district and city councils. Like, there's not much to do, is there? It's not a very complicated jigsaw. And it's and I find it quite depressing, because
it is allowed. Like, so first of all, like anyone who said it just takes a longer time because you have to involve the boundary commission. I mean, like, if you said actually we want to the problem is you don't have political agreement. That's the problem.
Yeah.
If you said we want to take these bits out, or have this part of East Cambs with Cambridge and this part with Fenland, or this part of Huntingdonshire with Cambridge, you can make that proposal. Like, obviously,
you can make the proposal, but is it going to be? But so the clear steer we had from Stephen Moyle, who's the chief executive of the Cambridgeshire County Council, and probably doesn't know anything either, is that he thinks that both national government and local government doesn't have the resources to do this. It's going to be really, really stretched. So any way in which you complicate things by splitting things up, then you have to split the assets up. It gets really, really it gets more complicated, more expensive. And his feeling is those things won't be judged favourably by the government when they're considering proposals, and so that ones that include lumping together existing authorities are the ones that are more likely to go through. So at the end of the day, even if we don't, there doesn't only have to be one proposal for the whole of Cambridgeshire. There could be several proposals, but ultimately the government will decide, and local people like me and you will have little influence over the decision, I think. And certainly our residents. I mean, there's no consultation at all. And so David and I talked about this last week. The parish councils. I go to my parish councils and talk about what's happening in town councils, but they'll have no opportunity to have a voice in this. Neither will all the residents in Cambridgeshire. It's just something that's being decided by a very small group of high-level local politicians, group leaders, basically, and ultimately the government. Even those guys, even the local leaders probably don't have that much influence, and it will be done by civil servants in Whitehall, I guess.
So there's, as I think I've said before, I think if I had my fantasy local government, it would be small unitary authorities with a regional assembly of some description. And the regional assembly having really quite a lot of roles. So like a lot of things go, like healthcare going down the NHS and so on. That's not going to happen. I think what's being proposed is better, even with all the complications, the result will be better than what we've got. I think there are real benefits to the simplification. It's not perfect, and there will be downsides to it, because there always are. I think, and I get why the government wants to do things quickly. Partly I think it's always going to be painful. It's going to always upset people. Let's just get it done. But also it will have benefits in terms of speeding up planning things and just having a more efficient set of local government, which the government wants to get to do more stuff. That's good. But I think, particularly somewhere like Cambridgeshire, where I don't think there is political agreement on and I think there isn't even necessarily agreement within parties about how things should be, where things should go. To ask for an interim in basically 6 weeks is very, very fast.
Yeah, and go on, Alex.
I was going to say, I think it depends. Really frustrating because, like, first of all, like, those reforms, yes, the government want to do them as quickly as possible with at least less resources. Like, unless you really need to spend the resource, obviously, if there's a simple solution, you should take that one rather than overly complicating it. However, like, local government reform will be here to whatever would be like in 28 will stay for the next 50, 60 years. So it's really important to think about like the economic case of this, like where growth will happen, like, what will actually, like how the travel to work area looks like, how the different services look like within like a kind of like how it will look like in 2070 or whatever it might be, like by the time the next local organization comes along. Because otherwise all you're doing is deciding on short-term political gain. Do you think in 2070 the politics look the same? No way. There will be new parties, new independent groupings, AI ruling us, joking. But the politics will look so different. Like those structures need to stay on for like 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And if we don't think about how the area will develop economically, and we just think like, okay, this is the best prospect for us to have, I don't know, control in an administration or majority or whatever, then it's like not a great idea at all in the long term, in my view.
But there's lots of gerrymandering going on as well. And I think there's lots of people in political circles who want to split up the districts into authorities that will favour them politically in the future, which is nonsense, because these are always, you look at the political history of Cambridge, which is now a Labour hotbed. It hasn't always been the case, and probably won't be the case in the future. These things are transient and they change. And we've seen during our time in local politics, Alex and I, and you, David, we've seen a massive swing in the political allegiances of local government as well. It was when I first started as a town councillor in 7 years ago, every single authority above me, including the MPs and the mayor, were all Conservative, and now none of them are. And that's a massive change.
Yeah, and I think it's wrong for people to try to do these boundaries for party benefit, for factional benefit, but it's also not going to work for exactly that. Things will change. I'm not convinced it would be a bad thing for all of the parties to go away and for us to start again.
Yeah.
But I'm joking, but mostly. But the things will change, and you can't predict how they'll change. And this is something that Stephen Bush has said about the Labour Party, which is that every faction within the Labour Party has taken every position on like internal structures and so on, and ended up being bitten in the backside by it. And I think there could be a similar thing here. One of the issues is, I've tried to have, I don't have the time, is to do it properly, is trying to look at travel to work areas and so on. That's actually quite a big piece of work. And
yeah, does it already exist? I actually asked some of the county officers if there's any data already available on this. But yes, the travel to work area, but also where the house building will be, and where future, I don't know, new towns will be in the future, and so on, and how they're connecting, and obviously the transport element of that as well in terms of infrastructure. Yeah, it's just really frustrating because it's just if I hear, and I heard many arguments, I won't name who, but it's oh yeah, if we do it like this, we can have a progressive alliance or a Lib Dem majority, whatever, as if it will still be here in 20 years time. Politics is changing. It is, we see already with the rise of obviously more independent councillors being elected in councils across the UK, with the rise of reform now, which will get a very interesting set of results in what will be the county council after May 2025, and in general with different, they'll be in 2070 or in 2060 you will hopefully have automatic voter registration by then. I hope it'll be in 2 years time, not in 50 years time, but you'll have just voting will just be different then, so you can have a lot of impacts on turnout, on the types of groups that are voting, on eligibility and so on. So yeah, I just don't understand why anyone is thinking on a long-term thing.
It's because a lot of people don't, and it's we might get a good position for the next 5 or 10 years, and it's very
yeah, if it works, I think it's very difficult to say, well, we should just go on this, even if we know it won't work in the long term. And I'm not sure, like I haven't looked into details. I mean, maybe like having like, you know, Cambridge and South Cambs and everything else together like has an argument for it, or maybe having Cambridge on its own won't work because it's too small. But I heard people arguing like, well, Cambridge will develop like a lot in the next 20 years, so it can be on its own authority. Like Peterborough is a small unitary at the moment. So yeah, I don't know. Like I obviously haven't looked into all the details and data into this.
There is also, I haven't looked at it fully either. There is a real problem though, looking at that a lot of the data is done from the that you use is from the 2021 census, which happened during COVID. And that, you know, there's a lot of work that's been done over the years that is you know, the sort of demographic work during COVID is, you know, it's not that it's not reliable, it's just it happened at a really weird time. Because the original travel to work zones, I think the ones that are out there are from 2011, I want to say, or data from 2011. You know, it's difficult to do, and it's also sort of trying to predict how areas might develop. That's kind of really difficult. And as you say, this is, you know, it is one where you know, this is probably going to last for a long time. So it is one that you really do want to get right. It's hard. I mean, the thing is, I don't know, I'd be interested if you agree. I kind of think that, you know, there will be the system isn't what isn't what I would design. Not that I've got any expertise to do that. And it's, you know, there will be problems with it, but it will be better than what we've got. Just because what we've got is so clumsy.
No, well, I you know, when the new government was first elected, you know, we were all kind of compelling them to do some really brave things, and I think they really have, haven't they? You know, the planning changes are, you know, and the houseman stuff is a brave move to address a problem, you know, which has consequences. And this, you know, very quick shake up of local government is also a brave move, which I applaud them for. I think we all agree that unitaries are better than multi-tier authorities. But the problem is that 1974 was a clusterfuck, and we're still paying the price of it now. You know, I keep saying, go to the ops manager's office in St Neots and see the plots of land that he has to mow and that HTC has to mow, and the fact that no councillor knows which lampposts. You were talking about footpaths earlier. All of those things cost causes of great friction, and there's historical wrongs that have never been corrected, and it's almost like I'd rather they do it properly and not rush it. But then, you know, then you get into multi-year things as well. So I can understand the need for haste as well, but I just hope we're not too hasty and we don't miss opportunities to fix, which is, you know, a really, really important thing. We talk about it every week, but local government is really, really important, isn't it? And we need to do it properly. And you know, bad decisions now could cause us pain for more than the rest of our lives, and you know, and are impossible to fix once they're done.
Yep. On that depressing note, is there?
I need to go, guys.
Go to work.
Yeah. Well,
I'm going now.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
See you, David. Bye-bye.